Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. Well, the New York Times has to be one of the nastiest, most devious, and dangerous publications in the Western world. Maybe in the world. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. And I'm going to show on this show how. The paper, which has previously published excerpts from Hitler's Mein Kampf, today published a 2,000-word opinion piece by a member of the Chinese Communist Party. You heard me right. The New York Times is publishing an official from the most heinous human rights abuser in the world, while the organization systematically persecutes minorities, continues to hide details of the coronavirus pandemic, enslaves and subjugates nations around the world, saber rattles in the Pacific, hacks US technology networks, steals intellectual property, floods America with opioids, steals Western jobs, buys Western politicians, and altogether creates a more dangerous world for mankind. The Chinese Communist Party is now a contributor to the New York Times. And I suppose we shouldn't be surprised, and we're not, but what we are is the watchman for this republic, for Western tradition, and maybe surprisingly, as far as the left is concerned, for human rights, or as I like to call it, human dignity. There's something particularly undignified about these reporters like Maggie Haberman hectoring and lecturing the White House press secretary over the president failing to condemn white supremacists. Fact check, he has and often does. While her bosses, Maggie Haberman's bosses at the New York Times, continue to peddle the party line of the CCP. Haberman recently gave a lecture to Boston College students where she said this, quote, "Almost everything bad and good that I've learned about human behavior and how to read people has come from two places, the newsroom and the bar." Judging by her Twitter tirades aimed at the president, the press secretary, and yours truly, one wonders if she ever leaves the bar. But Haberman is just a symptom of something far worse at the New York Times. Evil. On the 21st of July this year, the National Pulse exclusively dug into the details on the New York Times' history, especially as it related to lynching and the right to vote for black people in America. Given the New York Times' insistence in supporting the 1619 Project, which overtly attempts to rewrite American history, we thought we'd see where they had stood at major good versus evil events in Western history. Spoiler alert, it's not good. The New York Times published an editorial in 1900 saying that the Democratic Party may justly insist that the evils of Negro suffrage were wantonly inflicted on them. They accused the Republican Party at the time of committing a great public crime when it gave the right of suffrage to the blacks. That's their words. They called Negro suffrage a failure. Again, their words. The entire publication, however, was built on the backs of slavery. Did you know that? The slaves held by the Ox family, which owned the New York Times and made it into the media Goliath it remains to this day. Bertha Levy Ox actively assisted the Confederacy throughout the Civil War. She was caught smuggling medicine to citizens of the Confederacy, smuggling them in a baby carriage. The commitment she had to the South was something she had gained from her uncle, John Mayer. And prior to the Civil War, it's believed that Bertha lived with Mayer until about 1853. Mayer owned 5 slaves. 2 were male, 70 and 26 years old, and 3 were female, 65, 45, and 23. The mother, in other words, of the New York Times owner, Adolph Ox, whose family still owns the paper, by the way, partook in the slave trade while she stayed with her uncle. In later life, Bertha became a charter member of the Daughters of the Confederacy and requested that a Confederate flag be draped across her coffin, and it was. Adolph Ox, credited with turning a failing local newspaper into a globally recognized publication, has both pro-Confederate and pro-slavery connections in almost every corner of his family. Now, we at the National Pulse don't believe in changing, erasing, or even apologizing for history, but since the New York Times really does, Could somebody point out to us the apology from the Sulzberger family or the Ox family or anybody at the New York Times over this? Oh, it gets much worse. The Art of Propaganda, a full-page article written by Nazi leader Adolf Hitler, appeared in the New York Times Magazine on June the 22nd, 1941, as Nazi Germany began its largest military operation, the invasion of the Soviet Union, also known as Operation Barbarossa. The recently unearthed Hitler piece, complete with a portrait of the German leader responsible for the deaths of millions, right in the center of the page. It was actually comprised of highlights from the Nazi chief's seminal work, Mein Kampf. The article didn't include criticisms nor refutations from the Times nor from its staff. And that brings us to today. The publication of a Chinese Communist Party official marks a new low, or should I say a renewed low, for the New York Times. And again, should we be surprised? The New York Times is in open cahoots with the Chinese Communist Party via its involvement in the Tsinghua University Journalism School, which vows to produce journalists adherent to the Chinese Communist Party standards of Marxist journalism. The school enjoys support from a host of American corporates and establishment media outlets such as Bloomberg, CNN, Facebook, and the New York Times. Another story we broke here exclusively on the National Pulse. And remember, this is the same outlet that recently canned an op-ed from US Senator Tom Cotton. They later added an apology to the article that read, quote, "After publication, this essay met strong criticism from many readers and many Times colleagues, prompting editors to review the piece and editing process. The basic arguments advanced by Senator Cotton, however objectionable people may find them, represent a newsworthy part of the current debate. But given the life and death importance of the topic, the Senator's influential position, and the gravity of the steps he advocates, the essay should have undergone the highest level of scrutiny. Instead, the editing process was rushed and flawed, and senior editors were not sufficiently involved. While Senator Cotton and his staff cooperated fully in our editing process, the op-ed should have been subject to further substantial revisions, as is frequently the case with such essays, or rejected." End quote. For a senator of the United States, the kill switch. But for pro-slavery arguments? Nothing. For Adolf Hitler? Nothing. For the Chinese Communist Party? Nothing. Oh, sorry, I don't mean nothing. I mean succor, aid, abetting, assistance, and a leg up. The fact is, the New York Times has always been the paper of choice for totalitarian ideologies, their adherents, and their proponents. And it won't ever change. My guest on the show today is going to talk to us about some other kill switches the establishment have on hand. The kill switch for the president during the next debate, the kill switch for their ad campaigns. And Natalie Winters will tell us more about the state of the New York Times and their Chinese Communist Party friends. This is the National Pulse, where we watch the watchers. I'm Raheem Kassam, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the National Pulse. It's Thursday, October the 1st, the year of our Lord 2020. Joining me in studio is the Executive Director of the American Principles Project, Terry Schilling. Terry, thank you so much for being here in person today.
Thanks for having me, Raheem.
I know you hate coming to see me, but it's really special. I'm very grateful for it. No, it's very important because we're talking about kill switches today, right? And the New York Times doesn't see fit to give a kill switch. They're publishing articles by the Chinese Communist Party today. They've published excerpts of Mein Kampf before. They've published pro-slavery arguments before. They're attacking me, Maggie Haberman, on Twitter, which I take as just a personal little notch, right? For me, I love it. And we'll talk about the glass jawedness of a lot of these DC liberal types in just a moment. But I want to talk about another kill switch, a kill switch that you guys have experienced at the American Principles Project. And I want to get your thoughts on the other kill switch that they're talking about, which is killing the microphones in the debates so that the moderator, I think the moderator actually, the next one, this Scully guy, I think he actually interned for Joe Biden at one point, by the way.
I'm sure. I'm
not even kidding. It was decades ago, but I'm pretty sure. I'll have to fact check myself on that. But they want a kill switch for the president. But let's start with this one. I want to roll this advertisement from the American Principles Project that was due to run on Facebook and all across the nation. Let's play this.
All female athletes want is a fair shot at competition, at a scholarship, at a title, at victory. But what if that shot was taken away by a competitor who claims to be a girl but was born a boy? Senator Gary Peters and Joe Biden support legislation that would destroy girls' sports. They call it equality. Really? That's not fair. Not fair at all. Vote against Gary Peters and Joe Biden. They are too extreme for Michigan.
Terry, it's a good ad. It's a strong ad. It's an ad that I think resonates with a lot of people who want to know that their daughters are firstly safe when they're running track, when they're doing sports, and know that they're getting a fair playing field. But this ad has been banned?
Well, yeah, technically it's been fact-checked. So how this happened is a few weeks ago, our ad started running. We were getting great press from it, great reception with voters. And PolitiFact, one of the approved fact-checkers, part of the independent fact-checking network that Facebook has set up, did a fact-check on our ad. And actually, what was interesting about it, in their fact-check, they said expressly, we can't find any factual errors or defunct claims in this ad. However, the claims that it makes, we can't fact check. So therefore, we're pulling it. Doesn't make any sense, but they're essentially saying that we can't prove that Gary Peters and Joe Biden's support for the Equality Act and that legislation would destroy women's sports. This is annoying because this is what campaigns, elections are about. They're about debating the issues and debating legislation, and both sides have been free for the last several centuries or 2 centuries to make predictions about how legislation is going to impact certain areas of our lives. And Facebook and PolitiFact have determined that the people are too stupid to take in our ad and make a conscious decision as to how realistic it is, and it's an unfortunate event.
So let's just get this straight. You were trying to place this ad where? On Facebook?
Yeah, so we have identified actually over 1 million voters in Michigan and over 1 million voters in Wisconsin who are persuadable by ads just like this.
And you're quite transparent about what you do. You have the markings on the advertisement. People know where the ad's coming from. You go on national television. You get written about in Politico. So it's not like you're some shady, dark money operation. You're very upfront about who you are and why you're doing this.
That's exactly right. We're fully transparent. We follow all the campaign finance laws, and we're running it through our super PAC, which means it's fully transparent. You know exactly where the money's coming from and where it's going. But unfortunately, the fact checkers at Facebook have deemed that this is not an ad that people can consume responsibly. Look, frankly, this is about whether or not you believe in people to be able to make decisions about their lives. And frankly, if you don't believe that the American people can watch an ad like this and make a decision about how truthful it is and come down the right side, you really don't believe in the American people's ability to decide our elections either.
You don't really believe in, they always use the word democracy, right?
Right.
You don't really believe in the demos.
Right.
And the idea that people can look at all manner of different subjects and come to a reasonable conclusion themselves. Look, many people may have seen your ad and thought, yeah, you know what, I don't agree with that. That may be taking it a bit too far, whatever, right? But at least it would be in their ability to choose. They're not giving people that opportunity now.
That's exactly right. Look,
this is technocracy.
Exactly. We are the ones that have raised the money for it. We raised over $4 million for this campaign, which is why it was so hurtful and disrespectful. We've never raised this type of money before. But because of this issue growing in prominence and it happening to so many girls across the country, there's a federal lawsuit right now in Connecticut where Connecticut female athletes are suing their state athletic association because they're allowing boys to compete in their athletic events.
All right, you're going to tell us about that when we come back. We're going to go to a quick break now. Just in the meantime, you've raised a lot of money for this ad. Where can people go to donate?
app-pac.org.
app-pac.org. Make sure you're going there in the break. If you want to help get that ad, I'll ask Terry in the next segment how effective it is. This is the National Pulse, and we'll be right back. Don't ask Natalie Winters to get you a glass of water in the break. It comes back. I've got warm water now. It tastes like something's in it. Welcome back to the National Pulse. Here with Terry Schilling, the Executive Director of the American Principles Project. Terry, before the break, you were going to tell us about Connecticut and what's going on there. But first, I want people to understand why this ad that we just played is so important, why it's important to you, why you dedicated so much money to this. $4 million is an awful lot of money to be dedicating to anything in a political campaign. You must have seen something particularly good in the numbers and how it changed people's voting patterns. Tell us.
Yeah, so we test all of our ads using a technique called a consumer research panel. This is something that corporations have been using for a long time, and they use it to figure out how to poach their competitors' customers. We found that this sports ad that you just showed your viewers shifted the electorate 9.5 points in Michigan from Joe Biden to President Trump. In Wisconsin, it was even more powerful at 14.5 points.
Wow. Okay, hold on. Walk us through that, because that sounds like a campaign manager's dream. To have a single issue and a single advertisement that can shift I mean, usually you look for 1 to 3 point shifts, right, for something like this. You're saying between 9 and 14 points, depending on where this ad. Why? What is so strong about this ad?
Well, I think that it's an issue that really shows the insanity of the left and just how out of touch the left is with everyday Americans. If you think about the issue of, just transgenderism in general, it's the belief that boys can become girls through operations and hormones and surgeries, and if they just believe it, they are. We know this isn't true. But the other thing that makes these ads very powerful is our ads are about fairness. For the last several decades, we've had Title IX in our civil rights law to give women an equal opportunity when it comes to athletic events and educational opportunities. What the left is doing today with this gender identity nonsense is they are turning that on its head, and they're actually using Title IX against women. By forcing the federal government to pay for men to compete in women's athletic events, they're stealing more opportunities from women. And this is happening across the country, and it's why we have a federal lawsuit right now from these Connecticut athletes that are female. They're suing their state athletic association on the basis that they're violating Title IX. And that's what's so puzzling about what Facebook and PolitiFact did to us is that, federal courts have very high standards. And if the claims of these girls that these policies are destroying their sports are good enough for federal court to have standing there, why aren't they good enough for voters to see on Facebook?
Okay, so then the argument that people will ask, why aren't you suing Facebook?
We are actually in the process of filing a complaint with the Federal Election Commission. We believe that this is a violation of campaign finance law, frankly. They are giving Gary Peters an in-kind contribution, essentially, by banning us from attacking him on their platform. When we had set a budget of around $160,000 for Facebook alone. They're basically giving him free money and doing the job of his own party. And so we're going to be challenging this through the Federal Election Commission.
How long does that take?
It'll take a few months, but we'll at least get a decision so that we don't have this run in next election as well.
Right. But meanwhile, a Democrat gets cover from the establishment, from the technological establishment, big tech, from the media establishment. I mean, how has the media reported this ad? Because I've seen they have.
Oh, yeah, no, the media has been attacking it. Although I will say, Politico did an amazing piece on us. And they stayed away from the fact-checking and all of that, and they just focused on the political tactics of it as an interesting concept of where social conservatism is
almost like
going.
they reported on it.
Exactly. No, Politico, and I want to give a shout out to Gabby Orr. I have talked to so many reporters on these types of issues, and she was the first real reporter that listened to me and actually heard our case out. And so I can't give enough credit to her. I think she's the future of journalism. If we had a million more Gabby Orrs, well, you're kind of the future of journalism, I guess.
Natalie Winters is the future of journalism.
I'm not denying that.
Listen, the problem with, look, Gabby Orr definitely has a lot of sources in the conservative world. We saw this morning she popped a story of a conservative donor actually attacking the president for his debate performance. So credit to her as a reporter for being able to talk to people like you and talk to people like Doug Deason and elicit from them what she needs to write a good story, right? There's no doubt that it was a good story. Let's get back on track here, because you mentioned Connecticut. We're limited on time here. You mentioned Connecticut, and I want to understand what's going on in Connecticut. I'm sure the viewers do too. So
what happened was two boys at a high school in Connecticut started to identify as girls, and this is after a few years of them placing mediocrely in contests with men. They started competing in the women's league, and they started dominating. They won first and second place each time, and so female athletes in Connecticut filed a federal lawsuit to stop this from happening in the future. They want equal access. They want equal opportunities. We all know that males have a natural competitive advantage. Just for millennia of being hunter-gatherer types, we have it in our bone mass is denser, our muscle mass is more, we're taller, we're faster usually, on average.
I'm fatter.
And fatter, unfortunately. But it's an unfair advantage. Everyone knows it, and that's why these ads resonate so much with voters, is because they know it's inherently unfair.
Right. It's extraordinary what's going on, and I'm so glad that you guys are paying such close attention to this, bringing this to other people's attention as well. Now, I won't accuse you of stealing, you said this, but you're borrowing. And I think you're borrowing from the kind of vision and hard work that people like Phyllis Schlafly did when they first went up against the ERA. You know, talk to us a little about what's inspired you. You're a father of how many now? 15, 20, whatever it is.
Hopefully it turns into 15, but right now it's only 5.
Okay.
But no, Phyllis Schlafly is a hero of mine, and we're taking a lot of things out of her playbook. APP is the NRA for families, and what that means is that just like the NRA takes gun owners and organizes them in politics to protect the Second Amendment, we're taking parents and families and organizing them in politics. Right now, Raheem, we have over 30 people sending out text messages to voters because of that ad. Because of that ad getting shut down on Facebook, we've had to shift our tactics here, and we're texting voters directly. We're sending that ad to their smartphones, and they're getting it, they're responding to it. The response is incredible, by the way.
Just explain that real quick. We've got about 30 seconds here. 30 people doesn't sound like a lot sending these texts, but actually they're just sending text.
So those 30 people in the last 7 days have sent out over 800,000 text messages.
Wow.
That's how powerful this technology is.
Let me come back to you in just a second, Terry Schilling. It's all fascinating stuff. Still want to ask you about the debates, the president and the kill switch being proposed by the commission, the bipartisan commission for the debates. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, these are the type of tactics that the right needs to use to succeed. And I cannot commend highly enough to you. The website is app-pac.org. .com. app-pac.com to support organizations like the American Principles Project doing what they do, taking the fight to the left. We'll be right back after this thing. Welcome back to the National Pulse, here with Terry Schilling, the Executive Director of the American Principles Project. I was just going through the American Principles Project other website, that's americanprinciplesproject.org, and there's a petition right at the top, Stand with Senator Loeffler to defend women's sports. So same topic, tell us a little bit about your petition.
So here's something that's really cool is, our whole theory is that politics can change culture. And if you show that an issue can win in politics, it can lead to advances in policy and cultural changes across the board. And so we started running these ads on women's sports, and a few weeks later, Senator Kelly Loeffler, who, by the way, is in a really tough fight in Georgia, trying to run for re-election. She's running against a Republican. They have like a jungle type primary, and so she's running against Democrats and a Republican. And she introduced the Save Women's Sports Act in the U.S. Senate last week. And not only that, but she brought on several co-sponsors such as Tom Cotton, Marsha Blackburn, Mike Lee, and Ted Cruz. I've been telling people everywhere, not only is she the MVP for girl athletes across the country and protecting their opportunities, she's the new Karl Rove. When she understands the politics of this nature, to introduce this in an embattled election where it's very risky, she went out on a limb, but she knows where the people of Georgia stand. And they stand with girl athletes and giving them equal opportunities. She knew that the media was going to attack her like crazy. She knew that the left was going to lose their minds over this, but she did it anyway. And it's political jiu-jitsu, and it's the stuff that Karl Rove used to be known for, right? Karl Rove used to get involved in these cultural battles. In fact, the only reason George W. Bush won the 2004 election was because of the gay marriage issue. Kelly Loeffler is smart politically, and she's courageous. And I can't say enough good things about her. This really shows that she has great instincts, and she's willing to do the right thing and risk things just to do the right thing.
Rare nowadays. Terry, I want to pivot now to the announcement that we got just before the show yesterday. We covered it a little bit on the show yesterday, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this. So the Bipartisan Commission for the Presidential Debates comes out and kind of echoes the party line, right? And what I really mean by the party line is the uniparty, the Washington, D.C. consensus. I warned the day before the debate. I said that Chris Wallace would be a consensus-type moderator. He would try to throw meat to the people who send him Christmas cards and Christmas party invites. And sure enough, he absolutely did that. Now, I'm not claiming that was the most Nostradamic of predictions, but I think it's important that we get into that. What's happening now, that Wallace still, despite being on Joe Biden's side for so much of that debate, still couldn't control the beast that was President Trump on that stage. And whether or not you think that Trump did a good job or an okay job, or he should have been like a little bit softer at times, whatever, the point was he got to have his say. Under these new rules, President Trump may not be able to get his say. There may be a kill switch on or under the desk from the moderators to say, hey, you've had your 15 seconds, you've had your 20 seconds allotted time, we're killing your microphone, the people at home aren't going to be able to hear you. Your thoughts? Well,
I think that there was an interesting poll on Telemundo that surveyed Hispanic voters in America. And over 66% of them said that President Trump won that debate against Joe Biden. And here's what my theory is. I think that the look, if letting them speak, and if Trump really performed that poorly,
they'd want him to speak.
They would want him to speak more.
Right.
They wouldn't introduce a new mute switch, right? But they know that he's now connecting to Hispanic voters who, and it's actually been, Trump has been outperforming with Hispanic voters for quite a few weeks now. It's because Hispanic voters prefer a strong candidate. They don't want a consensus builder. They don't want a weak candidate. They want someone who's going to lead and show the country where to go. That's what they want. And I think
they have that word for that, right? It's
caballero, or I think it's cowboy or something.
Caudillo?
Caudillo, yeah, I think
that. It's a strong man.
Yeah,
right?
It's a strong man.
And here's the thing about the left opposing the idea of having a strong man is that, I mean, there are statues to Simon Bolivar here in Washington, D.C., and he was a strong man, and they want to just suddenly say, this is why Hispanic voters are stumping so heavily for Trump. I want to get your thoughts on, look, you're right, if they thought that him speaking was helpful to them, then they wouldn't have this idea of a kill switch. But there are kill switches everywhere now. This is what the left and the establishment are building into everything, into Twitter, into Facebook. As with you guys, you know, they hit the kill switch on you. They hit the kill switch on the president with the microphones thing. It's happening all over the place. So, I mean, for our audience who are experiencing this every day themselves, how do they work around that kind of thing? How do they get involved with organizations and things that you know, they're not going to get shut up every time they speak out?
Yeah, so the number one thing that we have to do here is to elect the right people and change the law. Right now, the law has actually been crafted in a way that protects Facebook and protects Twitter and protects all these big tech guys and their ability to censor us and turn on that kill switch. What we need is to democratize big tech. We need to make it an equal and level playing field to where they can't shut you down just because you want lower taxes. They can't shut you down or shut you up just because you don't think that boys can become girls. What we need to do is get organized and engaged in politics. This is how the left has changed the world, and it's the only way that we're going to be able to change the world. And so I would recommend starting small. Start with a group like APP. Go to FreedomWorks. There are lots of groups to work with out there.
Yeah.
But the number one thing is to get organized and get engaged.
I think a lot of people don't realize that there are good groups who will kind of hold your hand and walk you through this stuff if that's what you require as an active citizen. You know, the left has so many of these groups that do it. The right does too. It's just about finding the right ones for you. And American Principles Project is, of course, one of the most important ones out there. Terry, just look into that camera and tell the audience where they can go to get more from APP.
Please go to app-pac.com. You can actually sign up to be a volunteer and send out text messages and contact voters directly in the two most important states this election. We would love to have more people helping us.
Terry Schilling, thanks again for joining us here.
Thanks, Raheem.
On the National Pulse. You know, it is extraordinary. Again, this is a signal versus noise issue. The regular audience will know what I'm talking about. If you're new to the National Pulse, then welcome. If you're old to the National Pulse, then make sure you're sharing and getting more viewers and more subscribers. That's your job to help us out. And I'm incredibly grateful. I speak to our annual members. We have an annual membership and a lifetime membership on the National Pulse support page. I actually have phone calls with them as often as possible. I spoke to somebody yesterday who spoke for about half an hour, and he was talking me through a lot of what I just talked to Terry about, which is these kill switches that are being engaged all over the place. I'm sure he won't mind me telling you, I won't tell you who it was, but I'm sure he won't mind me telling you that Silicon Valley are planning a lot more of these on November the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th and beyond, to kill off any ability for the Trump base to claim a victory at the election. Remember, as Hawkfish said, Bloomberg's analytics group, even if the president wins a resounding landslide victory on election night. This is the National Pulse, and we'll be right back. Well, Fran, one of our super fans in the live chat, says she'd like to see Raheem as a moderator for the presidential debates. Me too. You know why? Because I wouldn't say a word. That would be the best way to have these two men debate the next time, not with kill switches. Especially from the establishment media, who are continuing to have meltdowns in that press briefing room. I'm sure you saw here on Real America's Voice the press briefing earlier on today. They're becoming increasingly unhinged towards Kayleigh McEnany. She's doing a great job at dealing with them, but I don't envy her position, quite frankly. And even Fox, yeah, that's right, it's Fox News again, letting the conservative base down. The base, by the way, that they've grifted off for decades and decades. Fox News White House correspondent had a public meltdown today. I want to play this for you right now. Let's roll it.
For all of you on Twitter who are hammering me for asking that question, I don't care, because it's a question that needs to be asked, and clearly the president's Republican colleagues a mile away from here are looking for an answer for it too. So stop deflecting, stop blaming the media. I'm tired of it.
All right.
Are you tired of it? John Roberts, are you tired of it? Maybe it's time to retire if you're tired of it. If you can't deal with the back and forth of sitting in that press room and getting your you-know-what handed to you by the press secretary, you're tired of it? You're tired of Twitter? You're tired of people coming after you on Twitter because you're constantly hectoring the President of the United States and the press secretary over white supremacy? You're tired of it? Boo-hoo. I'm sure your six-figure salary is very comfortable at night for you to go home to. John Roberts from Fox News there. Just another example of the mainstream media just totally off the rails, completely off the rails. And I guess it's predictable, right? Because there you go again. Fox News has been part of some of these Chinese Communist Party organization conferences as well, by the way. I wasn't going to say anything about that, but since Fox is so intent on making fools out of themselves consistently, let's talk about the New York Times, okay? Because this, for me, it's so egregious. I don't think people realize just how nasty and disgusting and gross the New York Times has been throughout its whole history. There's actually a great book out there. It's escaping me. In the next break, I'm gonna pull it up and announce it. There's a book out there. I own it at home. It's all about how the New York Times used to bury stories about the Holocaust at the back of its paper because they didn't want to go up against the Nazis. They were afraid of going up against the Nazis. I don't know if they shared ideological purpose with the Nazi Party of Germany. You saw what they had done. We reported a lot of it together months and months ago about their Confederacy links and their pro-slavery links, their pro-lynching links, the anti-black vote stuff. And hey, you know, I don't want to go back through history and litigate everything. We don't do that here. We're not cancel culture people. But if they want to be cancel culture people, I'm very happy to hold them to the standard that they expect for the rest of us. So let's go through this today. The New York Times publishes a 2,000-word piece by a Chinese Communist Party official. What's going on?
Exactly. The New York Times has not learned their lesson. They're still openly collaborating with one of the most brutal and repressive regimes on the face of this earth. So the story that we've had up for quite some time now, we've been ahead of the curve in terms of linking the New York Times to the Chinese Communist Party, even though, as you said today, they effectively were
themselves.
Exactly. But this Tsinghua University Global Business Journalism School. So to start from square one, Tsinghua University is not only the alma mater of Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping, it's also been identified by the U.S. State Department as collaborating extensively with the Chinese government on matters of national security and technology, and has even hacked the United States government. So collaboration with Tsinghua University is egregious, even if you totally ignore the actual substance of what the New York Times is collaborating with Tsinghua University on. So that's what this article really dives into. And essentially, the New York Times has assisted this school in the form of internships, financially, and really just backing and support. Their name is listed on the website. And this school, when you read the introductory letter, really the school's explicit purpose, as you said in your monologue, is to train journalists to adhere to the Chinese Communist Party's interpretation of journalism. That's why you see so many alumni of the school going on to work for outlets like China Daily, like my favorite China Global Television Network. But I think there's a quote that's worth reading. And this is again the front page of Tsinghua University Journalism School that the New York Times is in open cahoots with. Quote, "We should be committed to a firm and correct political orientation. Our school has been actively exploring the theory and practices of Marxist journalism, namely to applying the Marxist theory in observing the world, selecting and handling news production."
This is mind-blowing, because if this was Putin's Russia and Russia Today that they were collaborating with, everybody would be reporting it and condemning them and demanding on the House and the Senate floor that, hey, this cannot stand. But it's the Chinese Communist Party and they're happy with it. These people are happy to let this continue going on. I mean, Tom Cotton seems to be the only person right now focused on this stuff. He was tweeting about it this morning. We actually really wanted to get him on the show, but there was a scheduling clash. So open invite to Senator Cotton to come on this show whenever you want and talk about this stuff. But this goes back to other stuff as well. Remember, he wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, and they put that whole apology and correction at the top of it. Let me just be very clear about something. There's no apology or correction at the top of this Chinese Communist Party op-ed from today, is there?
No, there's no preface. They go straight into the op-ed. Sometimes they have previously published Chinese Communist Party officials, and sometimes they'll offset the article with a little text saying, this article comes from a member of the Chinese Communist Party, from the embassy, from a certain consulate, but there's no preface with this article. And it's exactly what you said with the Russia collusion hoax. Everything that they allege Russia has done to influence our election, whether it's actively interfering in the election, running high-scale propaganda operations and disinformation campaigns, infiltrating our universities, even our think tanks, the Chinese Communist Party is actually guilty of all those charges. And if the mainstream media would spend about 1% of the time that they do covering Russia, I think we'd have a very different country that wasn't completely subservient to the Chinese Communist Party and a mainstream media organizations that run op-eds written by people who've repressed, suppressed, and oppressed Chinese people.
Maggie Haberman, I think Natalie Winters is calling you out. Oh, I guess Maggie Haberman can't report on the Chinese Communist Party because she's too busy running op-eds from the Chinese Communist Party. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make sure that you pay attention to the nationalpulse.com website today, early tomorrow as well. We've got another big story coming out about the Russiagate hoax and how they intend to resurrect it in this final month before the election. That's the nationalpulse.com. And a special shout out today to Parker Malloy over at Media Matters, who shared a tweet that said, "Me first capitalists who think you can separate society from business are going to be the first people lined up against the wall and shot in the revolution." We'll be right back. the same organization, Michael Weiss, gave Natalie a name check this morning on Twitter. Michael is now, we went in two very different ways, Michael and I. Michael went to be an editor-at-large at the Daily Beast, which is about as far left as you can get. I'm obviously here, which I suppose is about as far right as you can get if you look at it from Michael Weiss's perspective. But Michael was I was going to say nice guy. He was an okay guy. Michael was an all right guy. I went to his wedding. It was a lovely wedding. He has a lovely wife. But Michael name-checked Natalie Winters in the National Pulse this morning on his Twitter feed because a website called Newsroom for American and European-based Citizens, sounds like a real reputable newsroom, apparently is linked to, Putin or whatever, right? Another one of these things that they say. So I'm not going to ruin the story here because we're going to put this story up later on, maybe even tomorrow morning once we flesh it out a little bit more. But Newsroom for American and European-based Citizens. This is just so funny. It's hilarious. I can't even get mad about this. They see Putin everywhere. And what they're effectively saying right now is because this Newsroom for American and European-based Citizens, NAEBC, cross-posted without permission from the National Pulse.
Without our knowledge.
Took one of our, why would I know what they're publishing? That somehow this is some kind of Russian operation that's laundering National Pulse stories, like to help Putin or whatever it is. It's amazing. And what's more amazing about it is this website, Newsroom for American and European-based Citizens, gets zero traffic. It's got so
not even zero. It's sample size too small.
It's got so little traffic that the SimilarWeb and the Alexas, these site ranking systems, can't even gauge how big this website is. And this is what these guys, Michael Weiss, the Daily Beast, Reuters wrote an article about this today. This is their proof that Putin's meddling again in this election. Oh my goodness. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're reaching the end of the show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Head on over to thenationalpulse.com. Stick around here as well on Real America's Voice. See you again tomorrow.